His personal mantra and his goal for you today is, and I quote, making it easy to do the right thing. That's his job in life, is to make it easy to do those right things, to make those right choices. He's now an international speaker who's been focusing on food sensitivities, environmental toxins, and autoimmune disease. He's been called the Sherlock Holmes of his business because he focuses on chronic diseases and recognizing the underlying causes. In other words, what path did you take to get here? And what's the quickest route to the highway to good health? That's what he considers to be his job in life. He's a teacher at the Institute for Functional Medicine and the National University of the Health Series, and he has traveled from far to be here with us today. We're very excited to be with him. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage a man who has trained and certified tens of thousands of practitioners, and today he wants to share his goodness with you. Please welcome Dr. Tom O'Brien.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be with you. I see why every speaker's been doing this. Now I see. A lot of gratitude to Vibrant for the invitation and the support from the team here. It's really wonderful. They are cutting edge, which everyone knows, which is why you're here. But thank you for the invitation. This is my boss. Einstein said the problems we've created today cannot be solved with the same level of thinking that created the problem. We have to up our game, and you and I are not really going to do it. I still drive an SUV out of necessity, but I know that's polluting the air, producing more particulate matter. That, yeah, I could do a Prius or something other than that, but there are some things I'm not going to change. I propose the way that we can save the planet is to raise a generation of children that think outside the box. This is my son, and he's watching. He's not seen me on stage. He's in Italy right now, watching on live stream. So I'm going to do a ronda and ask you if I can take a picture of all of you and wave your hands up and say hello to Gio. So if you could raise your hands, please. I'm going to take a picture of us and say, hi, Gio. Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, here we go. This is one of those books that we all have to read from the 1950s. Hans Selye is the one that introduced the whole idea of the word stress and what stress means from a physiological perspective. And I love his quote in the book, "Nor so naive to think you can do so without intellectual effort." I propose that most of us live our professional lives from a nutraceutical, when possible, or pharmaceutical perspective to whatever comes into the office. That's important and critical for function. But that doesn't change the quality of their health. That I propose we have to go past symptom relief, and we all know that. And that's what this talk is about, one aspect of that. I'm going to give you 12 premises, any one of which may, and I pray they do, stimulate your inquiry, wanting to learn more. I can't give you all the answers today. I'm going to give you the situation that we are in, with a couple of answers, but mostly the situation. In my career, when I read a paper that really caught my attention, it's like, what? I would take the front page of that paper or a graph from the paper, and I taped it on the ceiling of my bedroom, literally. And I go to bed at night and go, oh yeah. And then sometimes I'd half wake up in the middle of the night with an idea. And I thought, I'll remember that in the morning. I'd never remember. So I got this little thing with 3x5 cards and a pen. You pull the pen out, and a tiny light comes on so it doesn't blind your eyes when you're half asleep. And I would write down whatever the idea was. And in the morning, I'd say, oh yeah, that's right. I gave myself permission to think outside the box. I propose that each one of us do that in our own way. Take the study, put it on your refrigerator, put it on the mirror of your bathroom, but put it in your level of consciousness so that it reminds you to think outside the box. Now, that you're here already means that you're cutting-edge practitioners, but I want to offer a way to take it to the next level. Whatever captures you in what you've heard here this weekend, you've got the slides, whatever it is, order that paper, get that paper, or just copy the slide, put it on your refrigerator, and notice what happens when you're driving down the road 3 days later. You're all of a sudden thinking about that concept, whatever it is, and you've got some ideas about it. But if you don't give yourself permission to think outside the box of everyday practice, it's not likely to happen. And when you start doing this, you'll find the topics that grab you and won't let go, and you dive in. You dive in, and you want more. And you order the next paper on that topic, and then the next paper on that topic. And it doesn't take long before you're really competent at the concept, whatever it is. So isn't this cute? But I'm going to show you why it is. Why is it that there's hardly a healthy human, according to Aldous Huxley? Life expectancy has increased by 3 decades since the 1950, 1960 times. Parallel health span has not followed, largely impeded by the pandemic of chronic diseases. Many of you have heard every autoimmune disease is going up 4 to 9% per year. Every one of them, 4 to 9% a year. That's like, what? What? Every year. So I love this graph. It went on my ceiling. In 1950, about 2 billion people on the planet. Today, a little over 6 billion people on the planet. But look at the blue line. The blue line are those over 70. Compared to the growth of the total population, it's the elders that has gone up by billions. That's why there's hardly a healthy human. The main reason why there's hardly a healthy human is because there's more elders that have chronic disease. They've been around a little bit longer, killing off tissue, killing off tissue, killing off tissue, not knowing that they were killing off tissue until the disease comes. The societal triumph of longevity is plagued with debilitating morbidity, accentuated towards the end of life. There's a gap between lifespan and healthy lifespan and total lifespan. We heard Mark talking about that and a couple of other speakers. Here's the numbers. Men live to about 78, almost 79 years old. That's the average. But their healthy life expectancy without disease ends at 62. That's the average. That's the national average, which means 21% of their life is with disabilities. The last 21% of their life. For women, they live a little longer. It's 24% of their life is with disabilities. Those numbers won't relate so much to us because we all know more about how to take care of ourselves, but your patients, these numbers relate to your patients. And when you give them this kind of a concept, I had many graphs from papers in clear plastic folders in my treatment rooms. And sometimes I just grab it and show it to the patient that, look, here's what the science says. And they would be more inclined to understand the direction of thinking I was suggesting they use, and it really helped. 1/5 of an individual's life will be lived with morbidity. I propose a therapeutic vision for our patients is to reduce the gap between healthy lifespan and total lifespan. Instead of 20, 21, 24%, let's bring it closer to 2%, 3%, 4%. Like Mark said, I hope to go to sleep one night and not wake up, whenever that is. I hope it's a long time from now, but who knows? Who knows? I don't know if we can increase longevity. I do know that we can increase healthy lifespan closer to total lifespan. And when you explain that to patients, and show them those 2 slides and say, this is the average. And my goal is that that doesn't happen to you. It changes the way patients think. And that's what you want, is to change their paradigm. They come to you expecting the protocols, nutraceutical or pharmaceutical, to deal with the complaints they come in with. That's how they think. I propose you explain to them this concept. I want to increase your total lifespan, Mrs. Patient, and there's a lot we have to do that. Now, we'll of course address the symptoms, but that's not, for me, that's not my major concern. What's your preference, right? You bring them into the line of thinking on this. We're going to address the paradigm in reducing the gap between healthy lifespan and total lifespan. When do these eventually disabling diseases begin? Most of you are familiar with Melissa Arbuckle's study from 2003 that changed the way we think about autoimmune diseases. She worked at the VA, and she looked for people with lupus. She found 132 people with lupus in that VA center. Now, if they're in a VA center, they're veterans. If they're veterans, they were in the armed forces. If they're in the armed forces, they had their blood drawn many times over the years in the armed forces. What most people don't know is that the government has been saving and freezing almost all of that blood since 1978. They've got tens of millions of samples of our service people's blood. Arbuckle knew this, and she asked for permission to look at the blood of the currently diagnosed lupus patients when they were healthy in the Marines or healthy in the Navy. She got permission, and what did she find? Antibodies are elevated years before there's ever a symptom. Years. And that there's a predictable course by which they go up. There are 7 antibodies to lupus. These are the 7 antibodies. The horizontal 0 line is normal. Not 0, but normal. And so all 7 antibodies are elevated at least 5 years before there's ever a symptom. 5 years. Some of them are elevated 11 years before there's ever a symptom, right? And so first you get symptoms, then it takes about 2 years of seeing doctors to get the right diagnosis, and then you get the diagnosis. But now we're a decade into elevated antibodies. And by definition, elevated antibodies are creating inflammation. Now, why is there a normal reference range for thyroid antibodies? 0 to 34, most labs, maybe 32, depending on the lab. When is it normal to have antibodies to your thyroid? Well, antibodies are part of the mechanism of autophagy. And so you clean up all the old dead, dying cells and get rid of them and make new cells. So you have a normal level of antibodies. But when you have elevated antibodies, you're killing off more cells than you're making. That's the definition of elevated. So the idea that someone has elevated antibodies but no symptoms, well, let's wait and see. Like Mark said, what are you waiting for? It's a pathology that progresses and progresses and progresses. That's called predictive autoimmunity. And the work of Schoenfeld, the godfather of autoimmunity, his papers are excellent to read on that concept. So this was a summary of all 7 antibodies to lupus that Arbuckle drew. Every one of them goes up, and then you get the symptoms, and then you get the diagnosis. And here is the graph that she made, and she made this up. You have normal immunity, meaning a normal level of antibodies. Then you have benign autoimmunity, elevated, but you don't have any symptoms. Then you have pathogenic autoimmunity. You got symptoms because you've killed off so many cells. Then you get the diagnosis. And look above and below, and you see it's genetics and antecedents, how you live your life, that determines the speed of this progression. That's predictive autoimmunity. To increase healthy lifespan, we must address the imbalances before extensive tissue damage occurs. What does that mean? Well, it's called the prodromal period, before symptoms. And so when you screen, when you do the autoimmunity panel, you're screening to find out where is your immune system attacking your own tissue now, right now. Well, I feel fine. My thyroid's good. My T3, T4 ratio is good. But you've got TPO antibodies elevated. You're killing off more cells than you're making right now, right? right? That's the prodromal period. Now that becomes really important. Now, if you might remember in 2017, many newspapers talked about this. There was an announcement that came out. We're afraid that we're going to bankrupt Medicare because of Alzheimer's, right? And it's true. It's true because more people are getting Alzheimer's. Well, the government brought in a team of experts from around the world, the Advisory Council, looking at Alzheimer's therapeutic approaches. And it took them 2 years to write their report. When they published their report, I saw this drawing, this graph, and I started drooling because this went on my ceiling. And this should go on your refrigerator. Because when you think about this, look at what the prodromal stage is. Elevated inflammation, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells. And look at what symptoms you've got. 0. But you're killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells. And this goes for 20 years. That's why Blue Cross did a paper in February of 2019, and they said, we've got a real problem here. In the previous 4-year period, there was a 407% increase in Alzheimer's in 30 to 44-year-olds. In 4 years, they said, we've got a real problem. So it's not taking 20 years anymore. It probably does, but these kids, their brain started going when they were 4 and 5. They had inflammation in their brain already. But this is 20-some years. Then you get to mild cognitive impairment. And here, you walk out of the shopping center. What row did I park my car in? Where did I put my keys? Oh, that person walking towards me. What's their name? What's their name? What's their name? That's called mild cognitive impairment. And that goes on for 7 years. So now you've got 25 to 30 years killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells. Then you get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. That's why when this test came out, I was so grateful because 2% of the body weight is the brain. 20% or more of the body's blood is in the brain. So when you've got low-grade chronic systemic inflammation from environment and genetics, when you've got this low-grade inflammation while you feel fine, what tissue is getting more damage than any other? Where the most blood is, in the brain. That's why every patient I see gets a NeuroZoomer Plus. Why? Because it scares the hell out of them. And then they understand they need to shift their paradigm. If you want a healthy lifespan, Mrs. Patient, we have to reduce your inflammation. Here is the marker that I know of right now that's more comprehensive than any other marker of low-grade chronic systemic inflammation. And I asked my friends at IFM, I asked Jill, how often do you get a NeuroZoomer Plus back that's negative? And Jill Carnahan was taking a glass of orange like that. Never, because we're all breathing the air. You think this air is not toxic? What about the flame retardant chemicals in the carpet that are outgassing all the time? You could pick so many different things that are outgassing that we're breathing all the time, let alone chemtrails, that all of us have increased inflammation in our brain. That's why Alzheimer's is going through the roof. Because we're all taking in these environmental toxins. That's not today's talk, but that's and maybe that's going to go on your ceiling and you're going to do the deep dive and you may be up here next year talking about the environmental toxins causing inflammation in the brain, if that's what grabs you and you want to study. But I'm hoping that this concept grabs you. 2% of the weight of the body is the brain, 20% or more of the blood of the body is in the brain. Well, wouldn't that mean if I've got inflammation in my bloodstream, I've got a whole lot of inflammation in my brain? And, I'm from Chicago originally, and the immortal words of Rosanna Dana, you think? Right? Excuse me. I'm dating myself, I think. Okay. To increase healthy lifespan, we must address the imbalances before extensive tissue damage occurs. In my clinical experience, no one gets one disease. They may get one diagnosis, but the mechanism is systemic. Focus on addressing the presenting symptoms successfully, and you are still likely to exacerbate the comorbidities if they're still living the same lifestyle. You don't increase healthy lifespan. How do we address the mechanisms triggering comorbidities? And how can we accomplish this during the prodromal period when they don't have symptoms? This is my friend Andrew Campbell. In God we trust, all others require data. I'm not about symptom relief. I know that that's got to be the priority with the patient or they go somewhere else. So of course you have to do, but that's not health care. That's symptom relief, hopefully without toxic side effects. But it's educating the patient of this dynamic because our society, 4 to 9% a year, every autoimmune disease is going up. And all the statistics we heard from Isaac this morning about kids' brains, it's like, whoa, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. So we have to give them, making it easy to do the right thing means give them the big picture. And then they understand it's step by step by step by step to take care of this. There's no one pill no one diet that's going to do it. So when this paper came out, you know, I've been talking about gluten for a decade or more on stage, and we always had a problem with the tests because the tests only looked at alpha-gliadin and transglutaminase. Well, there's 62 peptides of wheat that I know of that activate an immune response. 62. Why are we only checking one? And when you read the studies that say 50% of celiacs have elevated alpha-gliadin, well, wait a minute. But that's the only autoimmune disease that we know what the trigger is. It's wheat, it's gluten. But only half the people have a positive test. And many doctors do that test. It comes back then to see, you're fine with wheat. See, here's a test, you're fine. But doc, I don't feel good when I eat wheat. I get a little bloated. Yeah, but stress. It's stress. It's the test. That's why I call them the 4 horsemen of celiac disease, the researchers who published so many papers in my developmental years of understanding. They still publish today, but it's Alessio Fasano at Harvard, Peter Green at Columbia, Stefano Guandolini, University of Chicago, and Joe Murray at Mayo. Joe Murray is the guy that has leather patches on the elbows of his sport coats, bow tie, horn-rimmed glasses. He's a geek of geeks. And his papers are wonderful to read because they're so understandable. Well, I saw this paper came out in January of 2016, and it was like, wait, what? What? And you see the stats on the accuracy of these tests. Well, a combination, and this is from Mayo Clinic, Murray and his team at Mayo Clinic. A combination of lithography and biochemistry for peptide synthesis has opened the door to a new era in laboratory medicine. What does he mean by a new era in laboratory medicine? If I spoke to you in 1990 and I said, you know, in about 25 years, 30 years or so, I'm going to carry this little black thing in my hand, you know, about the size of my wallet, and I'm just going to push on a few of the buttons here, and if I slide my hand one way or the other, I can tell you within 5 seconds that the air particulate matter in San Jose today is 23. It's a good day to exercise outside. But in Rome, it's 86. Do not ride your bicycle outside today in Rome. I mean, I can tell you anything you want to know because I've got the encyclopedia of the world in my hand, and I can tell you within 5 to 10 seconds. If I had told you that in 1990, you would have thought I was watching too much Star Trek. It's not in our paradigm. Well, here comes a paper that says a new era in laboratory medicine with 97 to 99% sensitivity, 98 to 100% specificity, looking at multiple peptides of wheat and other markers. And I got on the phone and I called the lab. And the lab's name was there, and I said, hi, I'd like to speak to the president. And Vasanth gets on the line. Hello? I said, hi, this is Dr. Tom O'Brien. He said, the Dr. Tom O'Brien? And I said, well, I don't know if it's about gluten. Yeah, I've been talking about that for a long time. Is this your test? Yes. Please come visit our lab. The next week, I was at the lab, and my jaw dropped. And I've never hesitated to talk about Vibrant since then because it's new tech, it's a whole different world than the tests we've grown up with. Wake up. I didn't know if I was going to do this, but I'm going to do it. Do double blinds. What does that mean? When you draw a tube of blood, draw a second tube out of the same venipuncture. Label the second tube Joe Smith. Send it to the lab and order the same test as you're ordering for your patient. You have to pay for that second test. Insurance won't, and you can't bill the patient. But then when the test results come back, 3 out of 10 times, it's like, whoa, do I talk to her about the good results or the really bad results? There's that much variation. And if you don't do the test, you don't know. It's true for all laboratory, but this is a new era in laboratory medicine with 97 to 99% sensitivity and specificity. And then when I did it with Vibrant, I only did five patients. Because, you know, I didn't want to spend the money after that because every single time it was within 2 to 3% without variation. Without variation. When you do that with the labs you're currently using, you do an OMG. Oh my God. Literally. We want to trust our labs, but the technology, ELISA is from 1986. So it's good, it's very helpful, but it doesn't have the sensitivity and specificity that silicone chip technology has. And I'm no lab scientist, but I can read, you know? And so, okay. The relative non-invasiveness, broad availability, versatility of the high-throughput peptide microarrays make this technology well-suited for incorporation into our practices and a promising new tool for biomarker discovery. And this is the wheat zoomer, and this is what a brilliant business move on their part. I haven't thought to high-five them, but you know, do it remotely. To include the most comprehensive test for leaky gut on the wheat zoomer and make it competitively priced so that it competed with anybody. It was a better test and it was cheaper than doing the test separately with other labs. Where do we begin educating our patients? Is there a root cause in the development of chronic inflammatory disease? I've heard a few doctors up here this weekend talking about root causes. I suggest there is not a root cause. There are many causes. And stop using that language, because when you tell the patient, yeah, this is your MTHFR, this is the root cause that your genetics say you don't detox very well, and they follow your guidelines, they feel better, but they have other symptoms, then the next time they hear a root cause, they're gun shy. But there is a root mechanism to every disease. And what's the prime directive in our practices? Can you tell I used to watch Star Trek? What's the prime directive? The root mechanism. Well, the Center for Disease Control tells us that 14 of the 15 top causes of death in the world are chronic inflammatory diseases. Everything except an injury is a chronic inflammatory disease across the board. It's the root mechanism to whatever comes into your practice. Should this not be the primary education you give your patients to increase healthy lifespan, closer to total lifespan, is to reduce the inflammation? And then you look for genetics and everything else as to how to help do that, but it's the environmental triggers that Arbuckle showed us, the environmental triggers in your genetics that set all this up. Chronic inflammatory disease has been recognized as the most significant cause of death in the world today. When the immune system gets activated, it's for one reason. It got the message, we're under attack. Fight and defend. What the heck is it trying to protect you from? That's the million-dollar question. That's called environmental triggers. What are the environmental triggers this patient immune system is trying to protect them from? When you reduce the environmental triggers, you reduce the immune response. When you reduce the immune response, you reduce the systemic inflammation. When you reduce the systemic inflammation, you increase total lifespan. It's like making it easy to do the right thing means you have to understand the mechanisms. That's precisely why I spent the last year putting together a docuseries called The Inflammation Equation. I went to 7 countries, interviewed 64 of the world leaders, many of the authors of these papers, and I asked them, what's inflammation? And we put it together in such a way that every day we tell the attendees, go back to the doctor that recommended this event to you and ask them, where's my inflammation coming from? So I wanted to educate the patients so they come into you already understanding what it is, what's the right thing they have to do. Well, they have to learn what the right thing is. So I'm trying to make it easy for them. And it's free. It's online, it's free. It's called theinflammationequation.com. I'd request that all of you just take a look at it when you go home. Just watch episode 1. Watch Terry Walls start crying as we're talking. And you go, oh my God, every patient needs to see this. Yes. And then they come back to you asking different questions. You don't have to convince them. They already get it. Mrs. Patient, if you pull a chain, it always breaks at the weakest link. It's at one end, the middle, the other end, it's your heart, your brain, your liver, wherever your genetic weak link is. Well, the weak link's determined by genetics and antecedents, how you live your life. You eat tuna fish 2 to 3 times a week, you got mercury toxicity most likely. That's the antecedent, right? So I saw this and I started drooling. It went on my ceiling. And I said, I've got to interview this guy. This is David Furman at Stanford and also at the Buck Institute. Furman and his team have the contract with NASA to figure out why the astronauts are aging so quickly in space, which you heard about yesterday. But why is it happening? And Furman put this drawing together as a report to NASA. It's everything on the left side of the screen that we get exposed to that produces oxidative stress in our cells, which triggers the inflammatory cascade. A continually activated immune system produces the systemic chronic inflammation. Patients understand this. That turns the wheel, producing inflammation, which turns the wheel, and here comes type 2 diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, cardiovascular disease, cancer, depression, autoimmune disease, neurodegenerative disease, sarcopenia, immunosenescence. It doesn't matter what the presenting symptoms are. This is the mechanism for all of them. So why aren't we focusing on this as a component of our education for our patients to increase total lifespan, increase healthy lifespan, closer to total lifespan? I don't know if you're going to live longer or not, I don't know, but you can live better, higher quality of life, more energy, less pain. I know that. I can not guarantee it, I'll do my best, but I'm pretty sure we can do that. Patients will embrace that. I'd get this one, I would print it out, put it in clear plastic folders, show it to every patient that comes in your office. They'll get this. It's not rocket science, although it helped with those that are in space. I think that was a pun, I'm not sure. The well-established 9 hallmarks of aging, every single one of them are all linked to sustained chronic inflammation, low-grade chronic inflammation. Doesn't matter what it is. Look, I did my telomere test recently for the first time. I called the lab and I said, I'd like to speak to the lab director. I'm sorry, he's not available. This is Dr. Tom O'Brien, get the lab director. He comes on the phone, he says, I've been expecting your call. I said, is this accurate? He said, yes. We did it twice, we couldn't believe it. We did it twice. I have the telomeres of an 11-year-old. And I said, well, my wife thinks I have the emotional stability of an 11-year-old, right? But that's just one marker. If I don't exercise regularly to maintain my muscle tone, like Mark was talking about so wonderfully, if I don't choose the right foods, it helps a little bit, but it's not going to make that much difference in healthy lifespan. Okay, so I've got the DNA that is ready to regenerate good, strong, healthy cells. But what's my lifestyle? If I don't have the lifestyle to support a healthy being, then I'm still going down with chronic inflammation. Secrets to aging well. So this one is great. They looked at 79 centenarians that had no disease whatsoever, fully functional. They compared them with 178 people under the age of 40 who had had a heart attack. And then with 178 people under the age of 40 who did not have a heart attack, were not diagnosed with any disease. So they had 3 groups that they looked at. 79 centenarians. Okay, well, is there anything common about these people? Is there any common lifestyle things? Do they all eat organic? I mean, what is it? What's unique to all of them? None of them had major diseases of any type. Disease-free centenarians had significantly lower levels of zonulin and LPS than the young patients with acute myocardial infarction, and had significantly, when they use that word significantly, that's like oh my God, look at this. It's significant. Lower levels of LPS than young, healthy controls. And look at the numbers. Look at the numbers of centenarians who slam dunk 40-year-olds and 35-year-olds in terms of zonulin levels and LPS levels. Intestinal hyperpermeability may cause endotoxemia, which in turn could lead to inflammation, insulin resistance, atherosclerosis, hypercoagulation. Our data suggests that serum levels of zonulin and LPS emerge as potential novel biomarkers of exceptional longevity. Is there anyone in the room that doesn't want exceptional longevity? Right? This is what your patients want. Increasing healthy lifespan closer to total lifespan. What other biomarkers are you currently using to identify exceptional longevity and extending healthy lifespan in your practice? I propose that most of us aren't using any. We may talk about it a little bit, but it's not part of our game plan. And the basic premise in functional medicine is test, don't guess. Our data, coupled with the fact that aging per se is typically associated with elevated circulating zonulin, endotoxemia, inflammation, insulin resistance, atherosclerosis, suggests that measures taken to decrease permeability and LPS translocation may help to reduce the risk of coronary heart disease and contribute to healthy lifespan. Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. The essential question is, with inflammation, 14 of the 15 top causes of death are chronic inflammatory diseases. Where's the inflammation coming from? What's the immune system trying to protect you from? Well, we all know Alessio Fasano, and he's very careful about what he says. We think he's going to win the Nobel Prize because he and his team are the ones that identified the mechanism in the development of leaky gut of the protein zonulin 25 years ago, and he still talks about it every day, and they're publishing more papers on it all the time. This paper he wrote himself. So you have a sense of how important the message is. All disease begins in the leaky gut. The role of zonulin in the development of gut permeability and chronic inflammatory diseases. This is what they're teaching at Harvard Medical School. All disease begins in the leaky gut. Among the several potential intestinal luminal stimuli that stimulate zonulin release, thus leaky gut, small exposure to large amounts of bacteria and LPS and gluten are the 2 most powerful triggers. I'm not talking about gluten today, but those are the 2. Today we're talking about LPS. What is LPS? One of the main toxins responsible for inflammation induction are LPS from gram-negative bacteria, which rank among the most potent immunostimulants found in nature. Can you hear what these authors are saying? The most potent stimulant of your immune system is LPS. Look at the title of this paper. Microbiome-derived LPS enriched in the perinuclear region of Alzheimer's disease. LPS, the major molecular component of the outer membrane of gram-negative bacteria, normally serves as a physical barrier, providing the bacteria with protection from the immune system. That's the job of LPS. That is LPS. How do you fight that? Really? How do you fight that? The immune system has a really hard job because that is protecting the gram-negative bacteria. That is LPS. It's like, whoa. So when you start talking about making it easy to do the right thing, you've got to understand this because it's one of the 2 most powerful triggers creating leaky gut, which is all disease begins in the leaky gut. 14 of the 15 top causes of death are chronic inflammatory diseases. Do you see how this author to this one, to this one, to this one, to that one, and here's the diagnosis over here, and we treat these symptoms? We've got to include this in our protocols. LPS is one of the most powerful microbial inflammation indicators from the New England Journal of Medicine. LPS is recognized by toll-like receptor 4 as a marker for the detection of bacterial pathogen invasion and is responsible for the development of inflammatory response. Do these authors say sometimes it contributes to inflammation? If you understand their language, it's responsible for the development of inflammation. It's LPS. It's perhaps the most potent stimulator and trigger of inflammation known. LPS-induced systemic inflammatory toxicity is termed endotoxemia. It causes a substantial increase in the production of cytokines, chemokines, and the synthesis of a broad group of lipid inflammatory mediators. Now, I read that and I said, I just went right past it until I read it the second time. And the second time I said, wait, what? What? LPS causes a substantial increase in the production of cytokines, chemokines, and the synthesis of a broad group of lipid inflammatory mediators? What does that mean? I didn't know what that meant until I read the whole paper. What are lipid inflammatory mediators? It's not widely known that lipoproteins are able to bind and inactivate microbes and their toxins effectively by complex formation, as documented by more than a dozen research groups. This is from Kilmer McCulley, the godfather of homocysteine research. Complex formation between all lipoprotein HDL, LDL, VLDL, oxidized LDL, and bacteria and viruses has been demonstrated by a number of different methods. Complexes, which means the lipids bind onto LPS, lock it up, and escort it out so the immune system doesn't have to allocate its precious energy to it. That happens after your immune system is so overwhelmed by the amount of LPS you've got. Then the liver starts making more cholesterol to grab this stuff that's in the bloodstream. High serum cholesterol and or high LDL is protective against infections. LPS or endotoxin, the main pathogenic factor of gram-negative bacteria, binds rapidly to lipoproteins, mainly LDL, and lipoprotein-bound LPS is unable to activate the secretion of various cytokines. So you've got this big suit of armor thing that cholesterol comes in and grabs and just escorts it right out so the immune system doesn't allocate its energy to it. That's elevated cholesterol, elevated LDLs, elevated VLDLs sometimes. LPS gains access to the bloodstream, for example, from the gut lumen, is bound by various particles. The majority of LPS circulates bound to HDL, but also with lower affinity to other lipoproteins. Paper after paper after paper on this. Lipoprotein A was as potent as low-density lipoproteins in inhibiting LPS from stimulating the immune system. This suggests that circulating LPA may be an important factor determining the amplitude of the response to LPS in humans. It's also been demonstrated that human LDL inactivates up to 90% of Staph aureus alpha toxin and even a larger fraction of LPS. Phagocytosis of LPS bound to lipoproteins also explains why LDL becomes oxidized. I always wonder, well, how come the immune system does that? Well, cholesterol is bad for you. No, it's not. It's the raw material our hormones come from. Too much stress, more cholesterol, because you have to make more stress hormones, right? And other mechanisms. LPS from chlamydia and also from several periodontal pathogens is able to convert macrophages to foam cells in the presence of LDL. Conversion of macrophages to foam cells by bacteria indicates that these pathogens, LPS, contributes to the development of atherosclerosis. Compared with normal rats, low cholesterol rats injected with LPS have an 8-fold increase in mortality, which can be ameliorated if you inject purified LDL into them. They don't die. Without that, they die when they're injected with LPS. compared with normal mice, increased cholesterol mice have an LD50 that's 8-fold higher when exposed to LPS. Whoa, wait, what? What? And every one of us should know this because it's the most potent trigger of inflammation in the body. And none of us know that, or maybe a few. I didn't know this until I talked to McCulley a number of years ago. Could this mean that sometimes elevated cholesterol, total, HDL, LDL, oxidized LDL, and or Lp(a) may be life-saving attempts by the body? Yes, it could. It could. I'm hoping that some of these papers, you've got all the slides, get the papers. If you can't get the paper, email me. I'll send you the paper. Put it on your ceiling. Put it on your refrigerator. Then you're driving down the road one day, you say, wow, okay, well, what about this idea? Or what about French pine bark? And you'll start thinking differently. Bacterial translocation is the passage of viable indigenous bacteria from the GI tract to extraintestinal sites, the mesenteric lymph nodes, the liver, spleen, kidney, peritoneal cavity, brain, and bloodstream. Did they just say that bacteria from the GI tract goes to all these different areas in the body? Yes. Damage to gut epithelium results in systemic microbial translocation that correlates with immune activation. For example, in the brain, LPS causes inflammatory response resulting in the degeneration of neurons, synaptic loss, and finally, neuronal cell death. Look at the title of the paper. LPS-induced model of neuroinflammation, mechanisms of action, research application, and future directions for its use. I'm hoping every one of you gets on this, and starts studying this. Put it on your refrigerator, because you're seeing it every day, and when you test for it, you're going to find it every day. Look at this one. Amyloidogenesis caused by LPS is the most prominent phenomena in the cortical and hippocampal areas. The most prominent phenomena. We're all terrified about dementia. Well, what's the most prominent trigger of inflammation in the brain? It's LPS. How important does this become? LPS can also induce characteristic features of Parkinson's by causing neuroinflammation and dopaminergic neuron loss. There are papers reporting persistent changes in the brain and cognition upon single LPS administration, even 10 months after LPS injection. This is consistent with the very first report of neurotoxicity after LPS exposure, when a laboratory worker developed Parkinson's-like symptoms 3 weeks after exposure to LPS. You've got this in your notes about different cognitive symptoms, brain symptoms, depression, anxiety, and how LPS contributes to it. Who's not going to do a Neural Zoomer Plus in this room? In my opinion, the most sensitive marker of low-grade chronic systemic inflammation in the body. My opinion. I haven't seen a paper on that, but it's certainly up there at the top, if it's not the top. And it's a reality check. My wife wants me to do another one, so I'm doing one today. Yeah, because I haven't done it in a few years. Well, do another Neural Zoomer Plus. Okay, honey. That's a secret to a happy life and a happy marriage. Yes, dear. Right? So, how and why is this primary cause of mortality for elders in hospitals a multi-organ condition? You know, the number one cause of death for elders in a hospital is sepsis, right? Why? Damage to the gut epithelium results in LPS that correlates with immune activation. So the picture on the left is what leaky gut looks like. The picture on the right is what a healthy gut looks like. On average, when you've got leaky gut long term, on average, LPS accounts for 13% of the tissue. Now, this is paradigm shifting if you get it. As you probably know, most of your patients have had leaky gut for a lifetime to some degree or another, right? So LPS is getting into the tissue. It deposits in your brain, in your kidneys, in your liver, in your lymph nodes, in your joints. In the gut, it's 13% of the tissue. Heal the gut. Build a healthy, diverse microbiome. Are you done? No, 13% of the tissue is full of LPS. Your immune system's still going to produce low-grade chronic inflammation, Because this stuff is already part of the body. It's stuck in there. This is stained for LPS. That's what it looks like when 13% of the tissue is made up of LPS. The immune system doesn't ignore that. That's a chronic systemic inflammatory trigger that the immune system must respond to because it's recognized as the most powerful trigger of inflammation in the body. And it's found in the peripheral blood mononuclear cells, which travels throughout the body. It's found in the spleen, it's in the axillary lymph nodes, the inguinal lymph nodes, the mesenteric lymph nodes, the duodenum, the jejunum, the cecum, the colon. It's throughout the body. It's throughout the body. It's in your brain. As you saw in the earlier studies, these data define the degree to which microbial translocation stimulates the immune system locally and systemically in the absence of an infection. It's in the tissue. You don't need an infection. It's throughout the body. We're all walking around as low-grade infections of LPS accumulation, depending on how you define the word infection. Did they just say immune activation in the absence of viral replication? Yes. And that endotoxin from the GI tract goes to extraintestinal sites such as mesenteric lymph nodes, liver, spleen, kidney, peritoneal cavity, brain, and bloodstream? Yes. Does that mean that what is already stored in the tissue activates a chronic systemic immune response without new exposures? Yes. Very recent studies that evaluate the pro-inflammatory potential of several different chemokines, cytokines, amyloid beta peptides, LPS, either alone or in combination, have indicated that when compared, LPS exhibits the strongest induction of pro-inflammatory signaling in human neuronal glial cells of any single inducer. It's the most powerful. You'll see it every day if you test for it. Don't test for it, and you don't know. Exposure of LPS from the gram-negative bacteria, abundant Bacteroides fragilis, to primary human neuronal glial cells was found to be exceptionally powerful, activating NF-kappa B that triggers the expression of the whole cascade. NF-kappa B is a major amplifier of inflammation. Turns on IL-1 beta, IL-6, tumor necrosis factor. It starts with NF-kappa B. And gram-negative bacteria, LPS from Bacteroides, we all get Bacteroides in stool analysis. And you say, well, we'll do a little work there. We'll change your microbiome. We'll do an anti-pathogen protocol. But we don't think about how long has this been developing? How much LPS is in the tissue? What level of inflammation do they have? Look at the Neural Zoomer Plus and your jaw will drop. How often you see how much inflammation people have in their brains. Imagine for just a moment how inflamed a body must be with this low-grade constant inflammation, fighting LPS in so many tissues throughout the body. Put it on your ceiling. Put it on your refrigerator. You'll start thinking about this when you're driving down the road. Does LPS in the tissue go away on its own? No. LPS deposits incrementally in the tissue over a lifetime, activating a continual low-grade systemic inflammation. There's a primary mechanism in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. 14 of the 15 top causes of death are chronic inflammatory diseases. Do you see how important this is? Critical to extend healthy lifespan closer to total lifespan. This fact alone should change the paradigm of how we address intestinal permeability and leaky gut. You have to retest, of course you do, because if it's not healed completely, you're still getting infiltration. This suggests that focus on detoxification is not an annual or even quarterly effort, but it's a daily lifestyle focus. Consider a much more comprehensive protocol of identify, remove, detoxify, bind, restore, recheck. You must recheck post-protocol. How else can you be confident of reversing the patient's chronic, low-grade inflammation fueling 14 of the 15 top causes of death? What is the impact of LPS? It passes through a leaky gut into systemic circulation, accumulates in tissue over a lifetime, and activates an immune response. It's the cause of sepsis. Read the science. Their words, it's the cause of sepsis. My mother died of sepsis before I knew this. That's why I'm a little intense. Sepsis is a life-threatening multiple organ dysfunction resulting from a deregulated host response to infection. It's largely due to endotoxin, LPS component of the outer membrane of gram-negative bacteria. Read the papers and you go, oh my God, I didn't know this. I didn't know this. Wow. In the old model, sepsis was viewed as unique clinical syndrome, difficult to treat, but the obvious target for therapy. That's why it's the #1 cause of death for elders in hospitals. In the new model, it's recognized as a late-stage syndrome on a continuum of endotoxin-related diseases. The new map encompasses the entire inflammatory cascade. The systemic inflammatory response triggered by LPS affects many organs. This is the new map. This was on my ceiling for a couple of months. It's because it's like, oh my God, this is the map to the highway to better health. This is the map that most people go down, is this way. Bacterial translocation leads to a progressive and catastrophic condition known as multiple organ dysfunction syndrome. We call those comorbidities. That's right there on the map. This map goes on your ceiling or your refrigerator. And then you just start thinking differently because you're open to new paradigms. You're just looking. It's a continuum of clinical manifestations of the inflammatory response to bacteria and endotoxin. It's a continuum of exposure and accumulation. And if you address the excess serum LPS earlier in life, you can reduce the amount of LPS that accumulates over the years in tissue throughout your body, including your brain, and thus reduce the constant inflammatory cascade at the base cause of practically all degenerative diseases. These are the sources of LPS. You've got the slide. Think about it. Dive into this. When you dive in, it changes how you think about whatever is presenting in front of you. It completely alters your paradigm of what it means for this patient to increase their healthy lifespan closer to their total lifespan. Identification, well, we know that interpreting the wheat zoomer, these are the markers on the wheat zoomer, and you interpret them to understand, is it autoimmune, is it toxicity, where is it coming from? Zonulin, which is a good biomarker, but the half-life is 4 minutes to 4 hours. If zonulin comes back negative, it doesn't mean that there's no problem because the half-life is only 4 minutes to 4 hours. Maybe you gave the sample or you collected the sample 9 hours after they had increased zonulin levels. And so it would come back with a false negative. Indeed, this fluctuation in blood zonulin level was studied for a period of 6 days in ICU patients with sepsis, and the values varied every day from 2 to 10-fold, day to day. Wait, same patient, same disease. Why are the zonulin levels? Because the lifespan of it is so short, just depends on when you take the sample. Antibodies, the half-life is 21 days. So when you look at the antibodies, you've got a more constant, dependable marker with 97 to 99% sensitivity, 98 to 100% specificity. This is the test report. This is the section of the test that looks at the biomarkers of intestinal permeability. And the antibody, oh yeah, their LPS is at the bottom there, IgA and IgG. When you reduce activation of the immune system by identifying the environmental triggers, you reduce the response of inflammation, you reduce low-grade tissue damage, you reduce dysfunction symptoms and the development of disease, which gives a higher quality of function, extending healthy lifespan. That's the test. Once again, please consider watching at least the first 5 minutes of the inflammation equation. We're all busy in life. You aren't going to watch the whole thing. But once you see the quality of what's there, you'll have your patients watch it. And then they come back to you with questions of, how do I look into this more, doc? How do I look into mold? How do I look into heavy metals? They'll come back asking questions, not needing to be convinced. If your desire is to address presenting inflammatory complaints wherever they are, extend or create a high quality of life in senior years, we must address the gateway in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases, the gut. All disease begins in the leaky gut, and the accumulated endotoxin that's developed over a lifetime. When you start thinking about this and you dive in to whatever aspect of it captures your interest, you feel much more confident, right? you've got it. You've got the big picture. Take care of yourselves. Make sure to tell those important to you how much you love them. Thank you.